All right, cool, man. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So again, like I said, general basis of this, we're gonna go over the first stage of status correction, how it works, what it means. Um, Again, I'm going to do another call to just cover the details because there's more than just one step to this, right? Like I included around 10 steps to execute this, but with each step, you're going to need to do some work and we're going to go over the overview and then the other call, I'll go over some of the more important details and the nitty-gritty to give people a little bit more clarity because some stuff does need a little bit more explaining than others. But right now, you guys are going to just get the high level overview of how status correction works, what it means, and how to just get started, right? This is basic fundamentals. So I actually recently I added this module into the class. Um, as you can see, I do have a lot of the steps here on how to get things started. We will be going over a lot of the material that I've already covered. For example, like the passport information, birth certificates, trusts, right? All of that stuff is aligned, right? All of it is aligned. Your citizenships, how to revoke some of the contracts you have with your state, and so forth, right? Employee documents, right? I cover that already in a lot of this material, but today, like I said, we're going through the nitty gritty and we're digging through the overview so you guys have a very solid foundation around status correction and then we can kind of build from there. So the first thing you guys need to know about status correction, right? So what is status correction? So status correction is known as political status correction, right? It refers to political allegiance and involuntarily provided information of an entity operating in commerce. Like, you gotta understand that, guys. You guys are voluntarily offering information when you provide certain things on your documents regarding your status. So if you were to select things like U.S. citizen, you are voluntarily electing to operate in commerce, right? Because it's appearing on public record. That's what they're going to put on you on file, right? So if you have all these documents filled out, for example, I show you guys a lot of the more common ones. That's the driver's license, you got your registration, right? Some people have a voter's registration. Like these things you're gonna have to rescind and revoke, so that you're not still tied to the system if you want to perform status correction, right? Because you can't actually be 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You can't have an ID driver's license and expect to live life as a sovereign for the simple fact that you're still contracting with commerce. If you want to politically correct your status, you can't do both, right? What you can do is you can administer in the public, right? You could administer in the public and still operate in the private, right? And that's why you have titles like agent or the
He
beneficiary.
trying to sound somebody from the barber shop. He trying to sound somebody from the barber shop. Dude
Hold
couldn't hear. He just, hey man,
on one
hey man,
sec.
you gonna holler at me on the way back?
All right. So what I was saying was when you're basically operating as an individual and you want to be private, you have to understand what all of these titles mean, right? If you're basically the beneficiary or the trustee, and you're acting on behalf of the _J, the all caps name, then that's completely different. You can still operate in commerce because you can't get rid of commerce, guys, right? You just can't. Like you're still gonna be driving on the roads. I'm not driving, but you're gonna be traveling on the roads. Um, you're gonna be engaging with people in commerce. Like that's just the end of story. There's no actual getting away from it. It's just a matter of how are you currently standing on paper and on public record, right? That's the difference here. On public record, if you're listed as a citizen, right, as a United States citizen, you are now operating on a very specific political status, one that involves taxes, one that involves regulations, right? Where if you switch over to the private side, it's a little bit different, right? That jurisdiction doesn't apply to you. right? You're more operating on the private side. So the first step is understanding what this means, right? So your political status correction refers to the political vol, allegiance and voluntarily provided information. So that's really what that means. So it is the process of defining one's legal position, which influences how the law applies to them, right? That's the end of that, guys. It's how the law applies to you. So if you're in U.S. citizen jurisdiction and you're a U.S. citizen, those statutory regulations apply to you, right? But when you switch over to the private side, we talk a little bit more about it later. You guys are gonna have to You're gonna have to switch over to common law. You're gonna need to also understand common law. You can't switch over and be private and then all of a sudden you don't understand common law and you can't defend your rights. That just doesn't make sense.
So
So
you would have to, sorry.
yeah, let me just go through the stuff, guys, and then if you guys want to ask questions, just raise your hand in the chat, and when I'm ready to pause, I'll go ahead and just that way I can flow through the material and it's easier. But yeah, so basically going through this particular process, you have to understand common law because common law is what you are now going to be using to defend yourself. Like those are your rights now. You're going from the regulations that U.S. citizen can use to defend themselves to now what an individual or non-citizen national, right? And then like as we go down here, I'm going to talk a little bit more about all of the titles and how all of this works, but it's all separate, right? And you still have to understand how it works. It's not going to be one of those things you could just dive into it, correct your status, and then, you can go about your day without understanding how things work. You're going to run into, police officers, you're going to run into certain situations, and you just have to know how to communicate with them, right? A lot of people see videos on the internet, and they talk about how, you know, they're they're violating their 14th Amendment and all this other stuff, right? Like they're trying to be combative. Like the last thing you want to do is be combative in this situation. Like when you politically correct your status, you don't want to be combative with anyone. You simply just want to communicate and articulate your rights. Let them know, like, hey, I'm just not on your jurisdiction, and then provide all the documentation they're asking for. So if they want to see your ID, this is where you give them like your passport card. They're gonna run your passport card, and then in their system, it should state who you are. Like it's really that simple. I'll show you a video later on when we get to the passport section about this gentleman that basically had his ID ran, and the officer basically he got the status back that the dude was on a do not detain list, and he basically squashed all conversation. He just gave him the passport card. But I'll share that with you during this call. But for now, I'm just going over the general basis. When we talk about identity, guys, right? It's like who you are, right? I mean, most of us don't even have any knowledge of who issued our birth certificate. So who are you? Like, think about that. You don't even know who issued your birth certificate. The big question is, who are you? That's the first thing. Right? That's the first thing. That's why this is a lot. This has a lot to do with challenging the status quo and understanding how all of this works. Because if you don't have a grasp on how all of this works, it's difficult for you to be able to challenge this stuff. All right, status is identified as so status once identified, your status determines your citizenship class. Standing, right? Your status defines the rights you possess and how the law applies to you, right? Legal implications of status. The person's status determines their legal position, rights, duties, capacities, and incapacities. Status defines what rights you actually have and whether you fall under a certain legal class. Notably, a citizen is not necessarily entitled to constitution remedies in court based on their status. Do you hear that again? A citizen right, is not necessarily entitled to constitutional remedies in court based on their status. So people are going to court and they're trying to argue the fact that they have a 14th Amendment right and all this kind of stuff. Well, little did they know, unknowingly, they elected to be a citizen, a U.S. citizen, right? And by definition, in Cornell law, it's a United States business. So they elected to be a business. And so when they're going to defend themselves in court, they're treated as a corporation because they are operating on behalf of the corporation, right? Now, in order to actually combat stuff like that, right, you simply have to request what the court's jurisdiction is, right? You have the right to just simply request for jurisdiction. Before proceeding with any cases, you always want to challenge what jurisdiction they're operating under, right? Is it civil or common? No, civil or criminal, right? Civil or criminal. And you want to determine which jurisdiction. And you have to also understand how the judge's role works, right? And for a lot of us in the journey, like it's a lot of new information to every single one of us, including myself. Like I don't know nothing. I'm sharing with you guys information have been applying and I'm very aware of, but I still know nothing because there's so much. All right. Anyone that thinks they know things even after 10 years of doing this, like they know nothing. Like this information has been built over centuries. This information has been built over centuries. And I'll be the first to admit I know nothing. Right? So as I go through and I'm learning this, it's simply coming from applying the information and understanding like, okay, it makes sense. And I'm learning more by doing stuff than I am from reading. Right? Reading is the first step. It's just like any other material I share with you guys in the campus, in the credit repair campus. You know, I can give you guys the best play when it comes to removing inquiries, but if you guys don't go and do it on your own, like you just never really gonna understand how it works. You're just gonna see the results, right? You can talk about the results, you can share the results, you can share the process, you can reiterate it, but if you don't actually sit down and go through and apply it, it's a completely different scenario. You got to go through and actually start putting things into action, whether you're confident in it or not, right? And for me personally, I'd rather just go through and run the motions, and I'm gonna learn much better by doing it that rather than sitting and waiting around for other people to do it, right? That's just my preference. All right, so basically, it's saying that you guys, again, as a citizen, you were not necessarily entitled to constitutional remedies. Right? The Constitution is the law of the land, guys. You guys have to claim your status correctly to be able to leverage the Constitution, right? So once you correct your status, then you can start leveraging the Constitution to defend yourself. So, for example, if one's status American national rather than federal citizen, their rights can be protected under common law rather than federal statutes and codes. And right now, we're regulated as federal statutes and codes once if you're not a national, right? If you're not a national and a non-US citizen, then you are regulated by statutes and codes, right? That's where those UCCs come from. USC, right? Those statutes and codes. Statutes and codes are not law. They're just statutes and codes. It's exactly what they are. Right? The real law is the Constitution. That's the difference. So understanding and invoking your rights. Once you correctly identify the status, you understand how it applies to you. You can properly invoke the rights and operate under common law rather than federal statutes. Your legal standing determines how courts perceive you and the legal framework applies. And this is why I was explaining to you earlier. Your legal standing determines how courts perceive you. You got to challenge the jurisdiction. Challenge the jurisdiction. Like figure out how are they operating? Because if they're operating under a certain jurisdiction, then you challenge it. Because if that jurisdiction does not align with your status, then you don't need to be there. That's end of story. You understand? And that's how it works. And most courts operate in the jurisdiction that applies to citizens because they regulate citizens. Right? That's why a lot of cases that are major end up going to Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court always falls back on the Constitution and not federal statutes and codes. When you go into court, you're dealing with the banks, or the lawyers, the judges, the banks all work together. So if you hire a lawyer to represent you, best believe like they're in on the lawyers and the judge. They're not there to represent you. They're there to make money because it's all a bank. Right? So understanding the political difference in legal status is essential as they determine how individuals are recognized and treated under the law. Below the definitions of each status, right? So a U.S. citizen, by definition, is born or naturalized in the United States, subject to its jurisdiction. You were born in the U.S., right? So remember what the U.S. means. Or someone who has legally become a citizen, right? U.S. is United States is corporation in Washington, D.C., right? Now, in order for you to not become a U.S. citizen, you have to politically correct yourself as a non-U.S. citizen, right? Because I've shown you guys the definition of what that means. Where did I share it with you guys? So much information. It was it's all about citizenship. There we go, right? So in United States business, right? This was in Cornell, guys, right? If you guys ever want to search it up, just Google United States business Cornell definite or law definition. Just type in law definition. In terms, United States business means a United States citizen. Guys, that's like the first definition. It's a United States citizen is a business. So anyone in their right mind, right, knows that a business does not bleed, right? A business does not need oxygen. So why would you claim that you are a business on paper? Right? And you try to explain this to, anyone that does not understand this information. They're gonna be like, oh, well, then where will I go? I hear that so much. People are like, oh, well, where would I go? Like, you're not going anywhere, bro. You just don't really understand what a United States citizen means. Right? And the information's right here. I'm always open to showing you guys where this information is. It's literally right in front of our faces. It's always been. We just have to take the time and review it, right? So U.S. citizen, right, by definition is a United States business, right? Then you have the resident. A resident is a person who lives in a particular place for a prolonged period, right? Tax term. So there's people who can stay in the United States and or they're given a certain time for residency, they become a resident, and they can basically claim or apply for naturalization after I believe 5 years in the United States. That's what I did. I came from Kenya, so I applied for we applied for naturalization after a certain amount of years, and that's how it works, right? And then you got the state citizen individual who is a citizen of a particular U.S. state, enjoys the rights of under both state and federal constitutions. American national is a person who owes permanent allegiance to the U.S., including U.S. citizens and individuals born in the U.S. in certain U.S. territories. All right, someone loyal to the U.S. like citizens and those from specific territories. All right. Non-resident, a individual who does not primarily reside in a particular jurisdiction but may have interest there. Foreign national, a person who is not naturalized citizen or permanent resident of a country they're in. All right, simplified, it's someone from another country who isn't a citizen where they are now. And this is what we are claiming. Foreign national. We are not citizens, guys. Remember what the citizen means. Remember that. There, it's imprinted in our minds that we have to be a citizen. You understand? But understanding what the word means is the most important. This is where we are. All right, foreign national. An individual residing in a country, for a foreign resident, is an individual residing in a country where they do not hold citizenship. Someone living in a country that's not their own. As a tourist, obviously secured creditor, single, depend. All of these are just, you guys can go through and read these, but they're literally options that they have on all the documents that you sign, right? Most, right? You're obviously not going to find tourists in a lot of the documents, but this is all goes back down to understanding your rights, right? And how you basically confirm your status. So what is the step-by-step process to correct your status, guys, right? So first step is to authenticate your birth certificate. Then you want to claim your nationality through the passport card, right? And fill out the DS11 for that. And then you want to update your social security number with the SS4, SS5. Change your name, right? And I'll explain that once we get to that. But you want to also clarify your newly found status with important U.S. documents, right? I'm gonna walk you through that when we get there. And file forms for tax exemption and non-citizen national. That's like the W-8 Ben. Apply for the 98 EIN number. I have a step-by-step process for that. File the UCC1 for the straw man, like the all caps name. And then you want to set up your trust and order your forms for 1099 forms, right? So again, the 1099 forms, we discussed that in the end. I mentioned it. You have to correct your status first to start taking advantage of filing 1099s. Okay. So authenticating your birth certificate, right? To authenticate your birth certificate, you will need the long form birth certificate, right? I give you guys all the steps you need here. Right, I've basically explained to you what it is, what type of instrument it is, what they consider it, right? It's a financial instrument. Authenticating your certificate of live birth. It's very case by case. Some states have different cases, but you go to your local clerks in the state that you were born in, right? That's where you would have to redeem it. All right, you have to go to the local clerks in the state that you were born in to request this certificate of live birth. We had a student in here who was having trouble getting access to it, right? But for the most part, that's one of those things, like I said, and I'll explain to you why they make it difficult state to state and what I've seen in my experience. Once we get to the passport section, I got an example of a situation I ran into when it was time for, determining when I'd be submitting my applications for my passport paperwork, right? But for now, I'm going to walk you through specifically the steps, right? So for your birth certificate, right? This is all the steps you guys are going to follow when it comes to authenticating and acquiring your certificate of live birth. And then I also have a document here. If you don't actually have your birth certificate, you can always fill out a birth affidavit, which is allowed to be used when you're filling out this passport application for your DS11. So let's say you're having trouble finding your birth certificate, you can actually use this birth affidavit, and you simply just have to read the instructions. It tells you what you need to do in order to get this completed correctly, right? You're basically going to have an older brother, a sister, a sibling, or your parent there to witness as you sign this. That's basically how this is going to work. But it is a alternative. And this alternative is only for people born in the United States. So I can't actually use this. But I read through the instructions. I read this document. You guys can read through it as well. It's right here. And I also share a link for that in the steps, right? I share a link for that in the passport steps right here, the DS11 application link. You guys are just going to click on it, and here are the instructions. Just have to read them, right? You have to read them. It tells you here, applicants born in the United States and applicants born outside the United States. And that's it. It's very simple. I think it's one of the easiest documents to fill out, but the more difficult part, specifically for especially someone in my situation, I was born outside the country, so I'm navigating through the authentication process. That stuff is happening online in my situation. So I'm doing it online for the authentication process. So I'm waiting on that for me to wrap up the passport card. All right, so when we dive into the passport card, right, this one in particular, I give you guys a high level overview, right, on step 2 on how to acquire your passport card, right? The exact instructions that you guys need are here, literally from A to Z, right? What to do, what to not do. It's all here, literally. What to put on the document, what not to put on the document. It's all right here for you guys, right? What to avoid, what not to do, right? I'm gonna show you this video. It's pretty cool. This was I think a few years ago back in and
Y'all right now, so they run my non-citizen national passport, and we basically gonna see what the police actually find he run this passport. So we're gonna actually see what the officer see. So right now, we're just waiting, see what's gonna pop up, see what the police actually find.
So he's the screening class.
Looked at it. I'm telling you, I've been doing this for almost 31 years now, so I haven't seen something like that. But what I did with it, but what I'm trying to understanding what I'm reading, and when we run people whatever, we have kind of hit. And so they say if you had because he's arrested or whatever, it just going to give me information. And if they don't arrest, did it pop up though? Yeah, it popped up. They do not. Please look at it. Please look at it. Yeah, but can I look at it? Like I know I'm saying like it. Oh please, I can't read that.
right. So he's on a do not detain list. And that's what the officer was seeing, right? The officer was seeing a do not detain list. So with that being said, that's basically how it works when you apply for this. Your status changes in their system. But it's one of the many steps you have to take to correct your status, because you have to go through and literally clean yourself out of the entire system of anything that ties you back to being a citizen, right? And so that's a cool example I share with you guys here, but these are traps to avoid when you're filling out the application, right? And I get into details here, so I encourage you guys to go back. But today, like I said, I want to focus on the step-by-step process that will give you guys the exact guide, right? Because I want you to use this like a grocery list, right? I want you to start with step 1, authenticating your birth certificate. Then you're going to go to the birth certificate class, and you're going to go through and start acquiring your birth certificate, getting authenticated, and so forth. That makes sense. So that's kind of how I wanted to structure this for you, so you guys can have a step-by-step and it's more organized and easy for you guys to follow, so you have better direction on what you need to do. Right? So again, you want to make sure you fill out the DS11. You never sign this document before you go to an authorized agent. You want to do this in person. So I called the office guys, and for me, in my particular case, it was the office in Boston. So they told me that I can only go in personally if I had an immediate or a flight within 14 days, right? So if I was not flying out within the next 14 days, then I couldn't book an actual appointment in the physical office. Like I either had to go to a post office to have a U.S. post office sign off as an authorized agent, because the post office, USPS, is the only other place you can go to have an authorized agent that is qualified to basically sign for a passport document. Okay. So for anyone that has a passport agency that's like in their area or whatsoever, they would have to basically call them, figure out whether they accept appointments. I don't know if it's different for other states. Again, guys, I'm giving you my experience from what I did in Boston, and this is what they told me. Could be different for each and every one of you as an individual. So I would recommend just calling them and gather the information like, hey, is it possible for me to set up an appointment to get my documents signed in for my DS-11? And they'll tell you. So my idea for this is I actually went and I asked about pricing. I asked about how much it costs to do everything. So aside from having all the proper documentation, like a photo and all the supporting documents like the DS-11 and your birth and your birth affidavit, right? And your letter, right, for your national status, you would also have to submit the payment. So there's a $35 processing fee for the application. So whether you're going to the post office or you're going directly to the passport location, the administrators, you would be paying $35. On top of that, you're paying about $130 for the passport book, right? And then the card is an extra $35. So you're paying about $165 for these cards, right? Paying about $165 for these cards. And when you submit your application, you want to basically get both. You want to get the passport book and the card. You want both of them because the card is what you're going to use, right? It says the U.S. passport card is not valid for travel in air. So you use the passport card for travel in air, and then the book is for you to have as another additional form of identification, right? And it's telling you on the document itself. All right. And this is why I always tell people, I'm like, guys, just read the document, right? You're going to be pointing in the right direction, but you have to read this stuff. Like, no one reads the documentation, like that's on them. But it's here. Like they tell you exactly what you need to do, and so forth. And one thing I did experience when it came to the passport stuff was I did run into the situation where I was looking to provide all of the following information, right? These three here. So I had the certificate of naturalization for my parents, and then the foreign birth certificate, and then evidence of the admission in the United States and permanent residence, um, proof that I subsequently reside in the United States. So I asked about all three of those, and I was told over the phone that because I currently have a passport, that I can use that as well, right? That I can use that as well. But I'm gonna explain to you why I don't really trust that. Because it's not included here. It's not in the instructions. Now, although it will serve as proof that I am a U.S. citizen, I don't know how that works when it comes in question of if I really truly am changing my status, will I be using my U.S. passport that's registered as U.S. citizen to complete this process? I don't know. I'm just more of a fan of reading the instruction and saying, okay, this is the instruction that you guys are giving me. I'm provide this information to you, but you're telling me that I can use my passport instead, right? But why isn't it not noted here? Like why aren't you including that as an instruction that it can be used as an alternative? Right? That's just my question, right? I guess the argument can be that I needed to have my birth certificate and so forth to acquire it, right? Like I could see that argument, but I don't know. I'm more of like I'm reading the instructions and they're giving instructions on both, and I have to do things differently from how people born in the United States have to, right? Like your birth records are a lot different from mine because mine are coming from a different country. So that's just something to note. And this is why I always encourage you guys to read the instructions because I'm always going to point you in the right direction, but you got to read it and make sure you follow through with the instructions. The next step is you're going to update your social security number, right? So to change the status of your social security number, you must file the SS5. All right, so you're going to complete the form, check the box other, indicating your citizenship status, right? So this is the SS5 form document. Again, when you click on it, I have the link for you here so you guys can just click on it and it's available. But you're going to click on it and you're going to check the step of other. Right. And again, I'm going to provide you an example of how I did mine so you guys can have a visual of what I submitted. Right. I still am going to tell you guys to go through, read this document. Right. I'm always going to tell you guys the same thing. I'm giving you the exact steps that I'm taking to execute this stuff. Because I've read all these documents. That's why I'm doing them. Right. I read every single one of them and I'm just reiterating everything I've read. But you also need to be aware of that stuff. But for your convenience, the link is here, guys. The next step is to legally change your name, right? To fully represent yourself as a living being, you want to separate your straw man, legal fiction, and you need to change it legally. You need to legally change your name to all lowercase letters. And this process allows you to assert ownership over your legal entity. So you want to complete the required form. So you want a name change petition. Order is to show cause of name change, a decree to legally change your name, and you want to file these forms with the clerk court. Submit the completed forms to the local clerk court and pay the required filing fees. Again, it varies by state, and they're not that much. You want to research your state's process. So the name change procedure is different each state, so you got to look at what that looks like each state so you guys can know exactly what to do. Right, affidavit of status correction. So to officially document the status correction, you must send an affidavit of status correction along with the supporting documents to the U.S. departments. So you want an affidavit of status correction, right? I'll also include an example of what I have for you guys in this campus so you guys can read through it. You want a copy of your authenticated birth certificate. This is why you need to have it authenticated. So with those copies, you can use it to submit official documents, and then a copy of your passport card. You must mail these documents to the following departments, right? U.S. Citizenship of Immigration Services. They actually update your status in the system under Immigration Services, and that's really important. U.S. Department of State and the IRS Treasury Department. All right. So don't expect a response, right? Because if any documents are returned, it would indicate acceptable of liability, which they will not do. This process serves as a paper trail to document your status correction. So everything you guys are doing is documentation. And the reason why we're sending all these documents out and we're mailing it to everyone, guys, I need you to understand this. And I'm going to share something really cool with you guys later on how everything is basically it's a process of notices. So if you pay very close attention to every time you don't pay your bill, right? So if you don't pay your bill, what does the company do? They start sending you notices. So they're going to send you a notice of late payment, right? Then they're going to proceed to notice a default, right? And they're going to attempt to cure it. And then before that, they're going to end up taking it to collections. And so they're going through all these notices to notify you, right? You do the same thing to them. This is how it should always be. You should always be sending notices to them. It's the same thing that goes with the remitting process, right? You can't go into this remitting process, guys, and think that's going to take 2 steps and done, right? Because if it was that easy, then credit repair would just be just as easy, right? Because credit repair is just as hard to fight. You also got to go through the notices process. You got to submit different rounds. These companies don't want to see you win, and these companies are not going to allow you to just get away with it the first time every single time. You'll be fortunate to get it the first time. But a lot of this stuff requires notices. And by having this paper trail, you're basically keeping this documentation so that you can basically support any arguments you may have with them in the future. Right? And these documents are there to actually provide proof of your status. And that's it. You're simply filing it for your status. Same thing with your trust. All right? If someone comes trying to take anything away from you that you've placed into your trust, for example, if you have assets like jewelry, property, etc., and a company comes and tries to garnish it from you, you apply to you simply, show up to court and you have paperwork, including your trust, that proves, or your certificate of trust that proves that you are a true owner and that is private. Right? That's all proof. Right? And that's the only thing that stands in court is proof. It's paperwork. Right? Hearsay doesn't stand. All right. When you're dealing with courts, a lot of them like to deal with presumptions and assumptions. Right? We're not dealing with that in this case. We're correct in status and we're dealing with facts and proof. So step 6, we're going to file forms for tax exemption as a national citizen. When applying for tax exemption based on non-U.S. citizen nationalism, you must file Form 8233. This form is used to claim tax treaty benefits and exemptions from withholding. So the key guidelines of filing this is indicate a country with a U.S. tax treaty. So examples include Canada, Egypt, and Morocco. Right? Reference the tax treaty article. So find and cite the article that supports your tax exemption as a foreign national. Countries that you reside in. You may list the USA while clarifying your status. You want to attach required documents. Right? A copy of your passport card, articles, and evidence proving that your status as a U.S. Citizen, right? So this is where you would take advantage of this once you've established all these steps, guys. You need all of this to move on to this step. Like you can't skip. Like you got to go in this order, right? So you get your passport card. You start filling out all of the documents that are followed. You want to include your affidavit of status correction. Then you can start filing for the tax exemptions and fill out the proper paperwork so you can start benefiting from this. Because everything is all about filing, guys. And that's why when they talk about taxes, people have the wrong idea of taxes. And they say that, oh, well, he doesn't pay his taxes. Well, yeah, it's not a thing, right? Like, you're not required to pay taxes. You're required to file taxes. You can get away with not paying taxes. You can avoid taxes, but you can't evade taxes. You can avoid it, but you can't evade it. And tax evasion is completely illegal, right? But you can avoid it by simply knowing what paperwork to fill out and how to submit your documents, how to leverage all your documents and your status. Right? As a business owner, like if you're a business owner right now and you have an LLC and you make X amount of dollars a year, right? And you have to owe 10,000 in taxes, you can take that 10,000 and buy a car with it. And then now you owe no taxes because you can write it off. Yes, you did still have to spend that money, of course. But are you giving it to the IRS and the government, or are you using it to build your business? It's a win-win, right? So whether or not you have to spend it or not, you're still not paying taxes, right? There's a story of Grant Cardone. Grant Cardone owed like 50 million one year. His lawyer called him in December and he was like, you owe 50 million. Like, you got to figure a way to write this off. He's like, well, what am I going to spend 50 million on? Right? If you guys want to hear that story, it's on YouTube. That's actually pretty interesting. He's like, what am I spending 50 million on? And he figured it out. He bought a jet. So he was searching and searching, found a jet. He's like, look, man, got to figure out how to get this jet from processed for me. He's like, man, it takes months to almost a year to get a jet. He's like, dude, I need it by the end of this month. He figured it out. Got a tax write-off on a jet. Guess what he does with it? He uses it for his family travels and his business travels, and he writes off all the expenses on the jet. All right. Now, he did spend the 50 million, but instead of giving that 50 million to the tax man, Uncle Sam, he used it to grow his business, and now he's benefiting off of it. He got a private jet. He can travel with his family, be with his family, and also do business. So everything comes back down to the paperwork. Then you want to apply for a 98 EIN. You got the EIN number here. I have some really thorough steps on this process. This very particular process that I followed, that I got from someone else, and it worked out very well for me. So I'm going to share that with you. But this is where I was saying I'm going to include the documents and then cover the documents on the part 2 call, right? We're going to cover those documents. But as you can see, guys, this is taking up a pretty good chunk of the time because I'm explaining to you how all this stuff works. So you want to get your 98 EIN number, right? This is your foreign national number, guys. And this is a foreign national number that you're not going to have connected to your Social Security. That's the thing about this. You're not going to have this connected to your Social Security. It's going to be completely private. You want to file a UCC1 for the straw man, right? So you're basically going to use a UCC form, and the UCC form is used to establish a lien on your straw man identity. Now, the UCC1 is a public document, guys. It can be used for various things, but it's a public document, right? And it's one used to operate in commerce, right? And the legal entity is represented by the all caps name. So filling this form allows you to update your status as a creditor and claims rights over your assets. So you're the creditor. So this is how you would fill out the form. And I'm just giving you the steps. But when I provide the example, I'll include it right below so you guys can see that and have an example for it, right? But these are just the basic instructions on filling it out so that you guys can start getting that process going. And then you want to claim it, right? You want to claim it via trust, right? So for those of you who haven't started a trust yet, you guys are, you're going to want to do that. And there's 2 ways to go about it, right? Personally, I've created the revocable living trust. I haven't created a foreign express. I hear and I'm seeing that the foreign express is the most beneficial, and I agree, or I think it is the most beneficial for the fact that it gives you maximal tax benefits. Although, and 2, it's foreign, right? So it's foreign, so it's basically outside of the domestic area, domestic zone. And in this particular case, I created a domestic trust. It's a revocable living trust. Hence, I can go back, revoke, and recreate. That's why I created a revocable, and I did it for free, right? And I show you guys in this video here how I did it step by step. I explained to you what all of it means, the differences between the revocable land, and so forth. And then this video here covers it from start to finish. So you guys want to go through and watch that if you want to create one without having to hire a lawyer. Because to create a complex trust, it's going to cost you anywhere from at least 5K and above. The more complex it gets, the higher you're looking at 5 to 15K. Depends on how complex you want to make it. Specifically for things like an irrevocable trust with a lot of assets, and you're looking to get a lot of tax benefits. If you really want to make it very bulletproof, then it's going to cost. But if you guys don't want to go and spend the money, there's also this manual called the 𝐻𝐻 Trust Manual. I'm going to include it in here as well as I'm telling you guys. And there's the Rocket Lawyer tool you guys can use to create it. But the 𝐻𝐻 Trust Manual is a guide. It's over 300 pages, but you can actually go through and read through how to set up specific types of trusts, right? It's the manual that walks you through like how trusts work. And I think it's the best guide I've found around. And like that's how I learned about revocable living trusts. I learned about revocable living trusts by reading the guide here and just understanding the basics of what it needs, right? Your trust can be a basic trust, but you also have to understand if you're going to make a trust and put assets into it, you should spend the time to make it as bulletproof as possible. And that's what I recommend. But if you're in it and you're looking to start a trust and get all your paperwork rolling and get your process started, I'm personally going with the revocable living trust. And I'm using that to get a lot of my documents in motion until I learn more about things like the foreign express trust, about the irrevocable trust, right? I'm in the motion of actually just applying this stuff. Like I'm not gonna go through and skip and jump hurdles, guys. Like I'm getting it done. As soon as I learn about it, it's getting done. Right. Some beneficial places to start these are Bermuda and Cayman Islands. All right, these have very good tax exemptions. I've heard about the Cayman Islands a lot. That's actually where a lot of celebrities and big ticket clients usually use. But Wyoming and South Dakota being number one, for the simple fact that it has a lot of benefits when it comes to trust protection and tax advantages. But Wyoming is just as good, right? I have a bunch of LLCs in Wyoming, and my revocable living is based out of Wyoming, right? But these two are really good. And like I said, you guys want to go through and research each of them, just figure out what's best for you. Like, what do you want to, take advantage of? I'm giving you, again, my perspective, and these are the top two. South Dakota and Wyoming when it comes to revocable, and then when it comes to foreign express, Bermuda and Cayman. All right. Again, the guide is right here, how to create a trust. It's not that hard. And, once you do that, guys, you can start getting some paperwork in motion, right? You get some paperwork in motion. You can start getting things notarized, fill out your 2848 so you can start sending those documents off to the IRS regarding your power of attorney and fiduciary notice, and so forth. All right, so now that we've created the trust, now you can go and start ordering your 1099 forms to start taking advantage of things like purchasing property, discharging debts, and using it as insurance, right? While this is where I'm at, guys, I'm more on the trust side. I completed the trust stuff. I'm just waiting on my passport, right? I've got all this stuff completed. I need my passport. And that's a birth certificate situation. So at the end, once I have that completed, I'm going to start executing this, but I've already started diving into the 1099s, right? I actually dropped this in the chat. I've been reading the instructions on 1099s, right? There's differences between the 99As and the 99Cs. One you have to fill out for specific items that are 3 years old and above, or some are under 3 years. And you have to understand how each of them work and the instructions. And so I've shared with you guys a call so that I can read through the instructions with you guys and break it down the way I'm doing now, so that you guys can have a different perspective of this, and then come back later and read it yourself so that you guys can get a better understanding of how all that stuff works. But it's really easy to order your forms. They come really fast. So I posted the link for you guys here. Once you got to this point, you just click on it. You type in 1099 right here, and you can order up to 100 a form. So you put 100 here, you order it, it's free. You add it to your cart, all right? You view your cart, enter your address, ships it, and those suckers arrive within 7 to 10 days. They come pretty quick. So you'll get those forms as soon as you order them. Personally, I ordered like 25 of each, right? I got like every form you can think of, 1099A, C, 96, all of those, right? So while I'm still in the process of working on that, this is where I ordered the documents, and I encourage you guys to go here to find them, right? They're pretty cool. I mean, I got a bunch of them here. Let me share them with you guys. They also come with instructions, right? So, and this is what I'm going to tell you guys to read the instructions as well, but they come with like these instructions, like these papers, but you never want to print them online, right? They're going to come and they're going to look like this. And a lot of them are going to give you the ability to fill them out and rip through them, right? They're going to look just like this, and they're going to have multiple pages attached to them. So when it comes to the 1099 forms and you filling those out, you cannot simply print them online. You have to order them. Like, you have to. Cool, cool. So now that I covered all of that, does anyone have questions so that I can dive into any questions you guys may have? And then I can revisit any of these topics that I covered. Let me check the chat. Can we recoup funds at tax refund? Yes, you can. You can. I'm actually in the process of that, but you guys have to understand that the IRS is currently reviewing all my stuff. I submitted them all in December, like early January, December. So I'm waiting for them to get back to me on all that stuff. But yes,